When I put the idea of the most powerful character in a fictional world in your mind, you're most likely going to first think of raw combat ability and who would beat everyone else in a fight, which brings to mind a lot of toxic power scaling arguments. But that isn't the only way to be powerful. You can have influence, be it politically or in a more grassroots context. You can be remembered by a lot of people. Your name can simply be known. And also, you can have powers that, while not necessarily making you the strongest in raw combat, can do a whole lot of impressive and incredible things that the strongest punchy guy in the world couldn't possibly dream of. And this is where our good friend Nia Xenoblade comes in. Giving a more specific spoiler warning would be a spoiler in and of itself, so I'm just gonna say this video will contain spoilers for the entire numbered Xenoblade Chronicles trilogy. Alright, I am assuming you're okay with spoilers from now on, so yes, Nia. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that unless you're talking about the speedrun of Xenoblade 2, Nia isn't necessarily the most powerful combatant in Allrest, even once she reveals her true form. But she does have a unique power no other healing blade seems to, where if you extrapolate what it can do, and assume that in the time between Xenoblade 2 and the beginning of Xenoblade 3, she has mastered that power to a much higher degree than we ever saw her in-game, the potential utility of her abilities is quite frankly absurd. Alright, it does still sound like I'm underselling her a bit, so let me be clear. While in terms of offense, she isn't the highest tier, she is still one of the most powerful blades to ever exist. And I think a reasonable argument could be made that her working alongside a driver with whom she has a lot of affinity, like Rex, could potentially give Adam and Mithra during the Aegis War a run for their money, at least before Siren is whipped out. So yes, she is very strong. Probably, I'd say, the strongest water element blade canonically we see, because I can't imagine Aegeon being able to nullify Malos's attacks with a water blast or something like that. But, in spite of what she can do, her power is still mostly spec'd towards healing. And based on the things we've seen her do already, creative enough use of her powers could allow for an absurd amount of things. Simply put, Nia's power is that of regeneration. Now, this might sound like I'm just describing what a healing blade does in the most basic of senses, but she seems to go beyond that. Your average healing blade, even a water element one like Dromark, seems to just be able to use regular JRPG style healing magic. You could assume that the way that kind of stuff works is by creating new flesh, speeding up the body's natural regeneration of wounds that would be normally treatable, or even winding back time to before someone was wounded in the first place, and I don't think you would be wrong for assuming that. But Nia's, we know for sure. She holds power over cellular regeneration, and does so at a much, much higher and more granular level. Her abilities seem to be tied to putting out a field of water ether around herself, as she's incapable of healing when Jin uses his absolute zero to freeze everything. But when that is out, it genuinely just seems like Nia can control the rate and type of regeneration in any organic life form in that vicinity. And the craziest thing about that is, she is not just doing the typical thing when you think about science-based healing abilities, which is, it accelerates the body's natural healing factor, either making it run faster to rapidly heal a wound, or improving what it can regenerate, allowing things like bone to be brought back easier. But she doesn't just have the power over natural types of mitosis. She can over-accelerate regeneration and control cell differentiation as well. Obviously, the clearest sense of this is the battles at the end of Chapter 7. Malos's destruction abilities are somewhat analogous to antimatter in the way they can be compared to Xenoblade 3's Annihilation events, and while Nia can't restore stuff like the ground that Malos erases, she can, seemingly without much difficulty, regenerate Pandoria's blade weapon after it had its tip taken off by Malos, as well as providing a shield around blades and drivers that prevents Malos's energy from getting to them and starting to destroy them in the first place. Now, we of course don't actually see something like an arm get taken off by Malos, but considering Nia says that blade weapons, because they come from blades, can be restored just like anything else, I think it's reasonable to say that blade weapons are somehow made of modified blade cells, which are very, very similar to human cells. So I'm gonna say, if Zeke, Pandoria, or anyone else got their hand stuck in one of Malas's purple energy orb thingies, she probably could regenerate it as well, as long as, like, their head wasn't taken off or something. And really, I have to say, I think the head being destroyed really is the only limitation, because Nia can bring back at least the recently deceased. Now, it's Xenoblade 2, so we don't actually see any blood or injuries, but based on dialogue, Niall Ardenak was completely visibly dead, and his body severely damaged after taking Bana's explosion to the face. Nia was able to completely restore him, and that was enough to bring him back to life. Granted, the reason Nia was awoken by her father in the first place was to try and find a cure for her sister's disease, and she failed at that, but she might not have had as much knowledge or proper use of her powers. She might have had a lower ceiling in the past. Or her specialty is only in healing wounds, and whatever was going on with her sister was something that she couldn't do. But she can do more than restore damaged flesh or blade weapons to how it normally is. She can force you to regenerate more than that. That's where the whole Malas with a cancer survivor shirt standing next to Jin with a tummy ache survivor shirt comes from. That is basically what she does to incapacitate him during the first battle at the end of Chapter 7. She causes his cells to regenerate too fast that it just damages the internals of his body and causes him to shut down at least temporarily until his overpowered Aegis regeneration kicks in. According to flavor text in the menus, what she uses there is actually a version of her level 3 Blade Special Redeeming Strike, which is described as destroy enemies from within by manipulating the power of regeneration. It seems like, as typical with anime-style power systems, if you're just raw outstatting Nia enough, she can't manipulate you like that. But if she can cause regeneration to go overdrive to damage your body, then I'm pretty sure she can also cause regeneration that would stamp out any sort of malignant regeneration, in some way smothering out any improperly grown cells, or even more violently, just cutting out all the bad stuff and immediately healing new cells to replace them. Yeah, if Nia can cause cancer in the way her powers work, she should also be able to cure a lot of cancers as well, and that's kind of crazy to think about. Her level 4 special, Divine Sword, also says, invert the power of regeneration to erode the enemy from within. And that's deadly in the complete opposite way giving someone cancer is. Redeeming Strike is causing someone's regeneration to go into overdrive, so they have too many cells growing quickly, or any new ones have something wrong with them that prevents the body from working properly. Divine Sword is either shredding cells on an individual level, preventing them from dividing, or even potentially causing the immune system to attack itself and other necessary bodily functions. Like, if she wants to, she can simultaneously give you tumors on all of your limbs to make it hard to move and swing a weapon, while also making your heart and lungs fail, and probably, like, injecting water ether into your bloodstream or something. Not a lot of good things going on there. The crazy thing about Nia is she can do all of this because she is a flesh eater who won the superpower lottery in the same way Jin did, but she didn't seem to get any of the drawbacks he got from eating Laura. It doesn't seem like her body is unstable or falling apart slowly in the same way his was. And even if it does, unless the integrity of her core crystal itself starts failing the same way that happened to Jin, she could just passively use her regenerative abilities on herself to account for any weaknesses that regular blade regeneration can't recover. And her regular blade regeneration is pretty crazy. Now, yes, any blade that's not bonded to their driver in a similar way to Pyra and Mithra with Rex can come back from basically any injury unless the core crystal is destroyed. It's sort of similar to how the Ouroboros forms work. Though, honestly, I would be inclined to believe that the way Ouroboros can very quickly regenerate severed limbs and stuff is firstly something that was invented so they can do more visceral combat with stuff like limbs getting cut off and stuff like that, without jacking up the age rating because characters are in mecha-looking forms and can regenerate everything and don't bleed. But also, that power itself, I think, comes from Nia's involvement with the Ouroboros stone. I'm guessing that Ouroboros forms, because they are pseudo-blades in the way they operate, with a sort of blade driver bond creating a new form, some of her regenerative ability is baked in to the power of Ouroboros, which is why the regeneration can happen. But that isn't the Xenoblade 3 thing I'm talking about. This seems like even more of a tangent, but did you ever think about how the only reason the good guys won in 3 is because Dirk, a guy who came from Allrest originally, LARPed Xenoblade 2 and didn't know how blades work, despite most likely him and probably a lot of people he knew having at least some kind of core crystal in their bodies. Nia, after waking up from stasis after who knows how many years, gets a chest wound that seemingly goes through her entire body, completely obliterating her heart. And while it does knock her out long enough for an entire boss fight and character resolution to happen, she's back up complaining about how much her chest smarts and giving exposition a few minutes later. And she was knocked out by being stabbed. Oh no, she was only knocked out by being stabbed through the heart. But that means she wasn't using her unique super regeneration abilities. That was just her passive blade regen, and it was enough to completely fix that. And yeah, I guess also her clothes as well. So an on-guard Nia who has her water ether field out is anticipating she might take heavy damage from something, and might be mitigating that damage using her water shields? Yeah, I'm pretty sure she could put her or anyone else's body back together pretty instantly. Outside of my theorized connection to the Ouroboros power, we don't actually get to see Nia demonstrate her healing abilities in 3 itself, but from a gameplay perspective, inheriting your class lets one of the 6 Ouroboros members use a surprising amount of Nia's abilities from the previous game. Life Sage's class skills are Steadfast Feelings, Instant Regen Plus, Enhanced Cellular Stimulus, and Abundant Oceans. Steadfast Feelings is the only one that's completely new, but it could arguably be analogous to the Fortitude blade skill from 2. And then the other 3, barring slight name changes, are Nia's passive battle skills from 2. The arts it gives are Saber Slash, Redemption, Water Lily, Hydroblast, and Aquamind. These aren't as big a deal. The first 4 are just the regular Catalyst Scimitar arts from Xenoblade 2, and Aquamind is brand new, largely because stance-type arts didn't really exist in 2 the same way they do in 3. But the talent art of the Life Sage class is Divine Sword. You know, the level 4 blade special from 2 that inverts the power of regeneration. So while canonically I'm almost certain the members of Ouroboros did not pick up the Life Sage class, within the confines of Ionios, Nia is even able to pass on that high an understanding of her power to others. This has all been well and good, but so far I've only really been discussing Nia's powers from the perspective of how they're used in the Xenoblade games, and how Xenoblade characters more generally use their powers. But we, and I think Nia as well in a situation outside of active combat, can be so much more creative. It's time to start thinking about Nia's powers like we're JoJo characters. Am I just phrasing it that way because Nia's powers can basically be described as most of what Crazy Diamond can do to living things, plus most of what Gold Experience can do to living things, plus a waterbender? Yes, but that doesn't mean we can't get more in depth with this. While healing a lot of wounds and bringing someone back from the dead is impressive, I have only talked about fresh injuries so far. And while I don't think Nia can revive someone who's been dead long enough for their body to go cold, I'm pretty sure she can heal older injuries. Scar tissue is the easiest example of that. I don't see why she wouldn't just be able to replicate healthy cells surrounding the scar tissue to fill in the area it covers with normal skin or flesh or what have you. But let's take that a step further. What if someone had a limb cut off in the past and that scarred over? I'm pretty sure Nia could just cause that person's body to grow an entire new limb. That's the thing I've never really seen anybody talk about. People always mention how in real life human cells have massive potential for healing and growing in different ways that the body just can't naturally do. But also, blade DNA is so close to human DNA, so it makes sense that a blade who can control the power of cell regeneration would be able to draw out such potential even from a human cells. Could she heal someone's paralysis by regrowing damaged nerves? I would assume so. Other physical deformities caused by a birth defect or injury? Pretty sure she could heal that too. We might be verging a little too close to the biblical here, but it is a Xeno game. Yeah, I think Nia could cure blindness, just generally. If someone's eyes are damaged or missing, she can just regrow functional eyes, and if it's a nervous problem, she can, again, regrow the nerves. Also, Nia is a water blade. I think she can walk on water as well, so it's not like this is the first Jesus thing she'd be capable of doing. Could she turn the water into wine? I don't think so, however. The one Gold Experience thing she definitely can't do is create life out of nothing. I think she needs access to living cells to control the regeneration of in order to do her thing. So even if you did give her grapes, I don't think she could, like, instantly transmute them into wine, though I'm sure she could use water pressure to compress them easier. But I think that's a little bit beside the point. And we can take this further. Human stem cells have crazy potential for what they can turn into, and even non-stem cells can do a whole bunch of different things if you mess around with them enough. So I'm pretty sure Nia doesn't just stop at physical injuries or disabilities. Now, purely mental health conditions, I'm not sure she would be able to treat in any way, both because in the real world, we don't know exactly how mental health works as well as most of the other stuff I've been talking about, and in order to do so, she might need to change the structure of the brain, which could change who a person is fundamentally, and I think that is not something that she would do character-wise. But it is known that a lot of symptoms can be caused by things like hormonal imbalances, and I don't think it's out of possibility for Nia to kind of custom make cells inside a person that do something to fix stuff like that. If it's something the body naturally makes, then yeah, I guess she could just make more cells that do that, or custom make a few cells that do that a whole lot more efficiently. I don't quite know about making cells from scratch to generate something humans don't naturally produce. Like, if someone has an iron deficiency, I think Nia is still going to tell them to take pills that contain iron and not create cells in their body that make more iron for them. But I think it's okay for her not to be able to do literally everything. Though I do think it's absolutely hilarious she can cure cancer and sickle cell anemia, but is unable to do anything about your vitamin D deficiency caused by not going outside. I'm now about to go on a very, very long section of the video involving Mpreg, but in order to get there, I need to talk about blades first. And that is the fact that prior to Xenoblade 3, we have never seen any evidence that blades are capable of sexual reproduction. And in fact, we know as a fact that the normal way for them to reproduce was asexually. The entire life cycle of being birthed as a core crystal, then being awakened by driver after driver accumulating data, returning to the Titan that birthed you, and then becoming a Titan yourself, never required another blade besides the parent, and never required human drivers for anything other than providing data and the aptitude to awaken in the first place. So considering that blade appearances don't necessarily have to look like any animal that reproduces sexually, yes, Boreas' design probably is supposed to look like a Napon, but he does not have the anatomy of a Napon, that's for sure. Do even humanoid blades have sex organs in the first place? Like, similar DNA aside, the only reason humanoid blades look humanoid is because of cognitive influence from their original driver in the first place. So, considering they don't need that humanoid appearance to reproduce, the humanoid appearance isn't inherent to blades themselves, and their primary reason for existing is information gathering. I have for a long time been under the assumption that with the possible exception of Aegis's, even the most human-looking blades either have Barbie doll anatomy or vestigial sex organs that can't actually be used to conceive a child. Literally the only things we know they have down there are something to pee and something to poop out of, because we know blades eat and use the bathroom in a similar way to humans because they are ultimately organic beings. But besides that, the jury's out. And if they have anything else, it just makes the most sense for it to be vestigial. So what does all of this mean? Well, we do know as a fact that human and blade couples can have children after Xenoblade 2, because Nia is one of the ones who did that. The long-standing theory has been that this was something that had to do with Klaus's last gift, as in he didn't just allow Pyra and Mythra to be reborn in new bodies, but also changed something fundamentally with how the blade system worked to change it so blades and humans were on a more equal level, and that presumably included them being able to have children with each other. But I posit a different possibility. What if it was Nia's abilities that allowed blade and human couples to conceive children? Now, this is delving really far into potential genetic modification, and I don't want to completely ignore the eugenics angle that could be taken with this, but I think curing genetic issues that exist in someone after they're already born, and then allowing a couple who would not normally be able to have children, doesn't really count under that. So, yeah, if blades and humans have very similar DNA, I've said this so many times in this video already, then if they had the organs to create reproductive cells with the DNA they already have, I have to assume it would be compatible with a human. And hey, guess what Nia can probably do? Now, admittedly, I don't think it would be a case of just growing fully functional sex organs onto a blade's body unless that's specifically what they wanted, but as long as she could just, like, make a little organ on the temporary thing on the back of the blade's hand that has no purpose other than creating a small sample of whichever cell type was needed, and then she can extract that and combine her powers with natural blade regeneration to have the organ just harmlessly die off and detach, and then do some sort of artificial fertilization. And, like, this is close enough to real, at least hypothetical, medical procedures where I could see this just being a thing that happens. And yes, human and blade couples would be the big thing related to the themes of Xenoblade 2 that would massively change society, but that doesn't mean that's the only kind of couple that Nia's powers would be able to allow to conceive. Like a couple that is infertile for whatever reason. I'm sure she would be able to cause the creation of cells that are fertile. What about same-sex couples? Well, all things considered, on a genome level, the difference between the sexes in humans is very, very small. And if Nia explicitly has the power to invert regeneration, I have to assume she'd be capable of causing cells to generate that invert one chromosome from the rest of the person's body. And, well, there you go. It's the exact same thing as blades once you have two opposite kinds of cells. Like I said, this would be done in vitro, most likely. It's not like Xenoblade 2's world doesn't clearly have technology for artificial wombs. But Nia can generate organs, so Mpreg is entirely possible if everyone involved prefers that. And if Nia can do this for human/blade couples and same-sex couples, why not one and the same? I genuinely think there's a non-zero chance that this is how Senna was born. Now, you may be hearing a bunch of things I've been saying and combining them together and extrapolating them in a certain way. And yes, I do think I've discovered another potential point to be made for the is Nia trans or was she intended as a trans allegory discussion. And that is, doesn't matter, Uncle Ben, she literally has the power to operate the most effective gender clinic in fiction, and it is 120% in character for her to do so. Now, I already mentioned altering someone's hormone production and things like changing someone's organs or effectively reconstructive surgery. And that's all well and good, but I think she can do more. I am fairly certain Nia can just kind of give someone a sex change on a genetic level too. Nia controls cell regeneration. Human bodies naturally have all of their cells regenerate and die in roughly 7-year cycles. Like, that's a very popular pop science fact. Like, the you from 7 years ago is Ship of Theseus, a completely different person from you now. So, like, if Nia causes someone's cells to start regenerating with some genetic changes, and then just keeps that person regenerating until their entire body regenerates, then, like, isn't that how that would work? Am I stupid? I am a physicist, not a biologist, so I might be talking out of my ass here, but it is anime magic sci-fi land, so I think she can do that if someone desires. Now, lastly, we reach something that I think she has the power to do, and it might be an explanation for something in Xenoblade 3, but we have no way of knowing if it actually happened. And that is bringing in a concept that existed in Xenoblade 1 as a kind of important thing, but I don't need to spoil anything, just the idea of gene integration. And by that I mean human and blade gene integration. Because virtually every Agnian character we see in all of Xenoblade 3 has some sort of trait associated with Blades in 2, or some kind of visible core crystal on their body somewhere. This goes for all of the party members, the majority of the NPCs, and even Nia herself technically counts as that because she's a flesh eater. She is already human plus blade. I've talked before about how Nia probably became the Queen of Agnes because she has at least some kind of political legitimacy through her father, exists as a figure who is kind of diametrically opposite to the previous Indoline regime, can be vouched for by the leaders of basically every existing country left in Alrest, and represents a union of human and blade due to being a flesh eater. So what if the people of Alrest properly became unions of humans and blades? And I don't just mean humans and blades having kids with each other, that's part of it. I mean every human becoming a bit of a blade eater and every blade becoming a bit of a flesh eater, properly combining blades and humanity sort of into one species. Now, does this kind of go against some of the themes of Xenoblade 2 and stuff like Jin talking about blades not being able to develop their own culture? Yes, I could see this not happening because of that. And I don't quite know where this stands in relation to all of the other races and metaphors in Xenoblade 2. But if all of the blades become a little bit of flesh eater, then that means that they can exist on their own without a driver. So blade lives are no longer tied to human lives. they can exist as their own people and do their own thing. And if humans get a little bit of Blade Eaters, like they have a little bit of core crystal type DNA incorporated into their bodies, then humans might develop some powers of their own. So blades would stop being seen as tools because they're the ones with the superpowers that humans can use without them. Or at the very least, just give humanity a bit more understanding of blades. I think this as a way would bridge the gap between humans and blades as a form of understanding, and kind of still allow blades to be their own people and do their own thing, while accounting for the changed world, the changed relationship with humanity, and the fact that I'm guessing the blade life cycle is also different now because most of the Titans are dead, so they wouldn't be able to reproduce that way anyway. And I'm going to assume that yes, Nia's powers and possible human gene integration would also allow blade/blade couples to have children too. This would also go a very long way in explaining how all of the Agnian soldiers have blade traits. Because yes, obviously there will be a lot of drivers and blades having kids with each other after Xenoblade 2. Like, we know this happened with Rex, Pyra, Mithra, and Nia. We know it happened with Zeke and Pandoria. I already posited it happened with Morag and Bridget. But that can't have been every single child born in the 2+ decades since the end of Xenoblade 2 prior to the intersection. Even in my longest interpretations of the time skip, a child who was conceived the day Xenoblade 2 ended would not be old enough to have a 10-year-old child by the time the intersection took place, and I am under the assumption that it was people who were already within the 10 to 20 age range relative to their race who became soldiers in the Flame Clock system. So yeah, we're looking at 1, maybe 2 generations of children post the characters we already see in Xenoblade 2, and I can't imagine everyone having partial blade traits that quickly. Funnily enough though, yeah, after a couple generations, it would make sense for basically everyone to have at least a little bit of core crystal in them. But then, after more and more generations, it seems core crystals are diluted. Yes, we know they are hereditary, at least among people originally from Alrest, but based on the city in Xenoblade 3, it does seem like eventually, if it's people from both worlds who keep having kids, those traits vanish over time. There isn't a single person with blade traits in the second city during the main game of Xenoblade 3 who was actually born there and wasn't a former Agnian soldier. I don't think this has any bearing on everything else I said. I think that's more of a factor of the two worlds coming together, but I guess it's interesting to point out. I don't know. Nia had nothing to do with this. I'm running out of things to say about Nia, but the fact remains, Nia's powers are kind of crazy. They are society shaping, and I think the fact that she did shape society post Xenoblade 2 for the better is another reason she is the queen in 3. And I think that's kind of neat to think about, even if I don't have anything else to say and am going to end the video so inconclusively because I'm terrible at ending videos. Have you noticed that? Until next time, well, maybe I'll learn to end a video better. This is Luxon signing off. Good lord, what is wrong with me?